My name is Daniel Ricciardo, and I'm a car mechanic. For millions of people, myself included, these are the first words we heard before we fell in love with a sport known as Formula 1. Before box, before lights out and away we go, before if you don't go for gap, you're
no longer a racing driver.
Instead, the seed for millions to become invested in the pinnacle of motorsport came from some banter from the Aussie honey badger. Which is why if your algorithm is even slightly involved in a sport, your entire feed is probably completely overrun by sad Danny Rick edits in the wake of the news that he'll be leaving the sport. F1 social media is completely on fire right now over this news. Danny's announcement post getting over 1 million likes in under an hour, and most of, if not all the drivers expressing in some way some public support. But my question to all of you is, does this feel right? Does this feel even remotely right to you? Regardless if you think it's for better or for worse, Netflix's Drive to Survive or DTS completely changed the world's perception on Formula 1. In fact, I would dare to say that it changed sporting media as a whole. And although the cast of characters and storylines shown on the show has grown as years have gone by, that first season of DTS does not work without Daniel Ricciardo. As we said before, he's the first driver you were introduced to, and with no disrespect to anyone else on the show, he's the most compelling off the bat as well. Not only was he very fast in a Red Bull, he was also just as much fun to watch outside the car, which, considering what the show Drive to Survive was, made him the perfect main character. He also had this underdog nature to him where he never was in a championship contending car, yet was still winning races. And for me at least, made me want to support him. Like, oh, not only does this guy seem like a good dude, he has the talent, and it just seems like a matter of time until Red Bull or another team gives him a good car and he can win the championship. Right? Yeah, anyway, so he just got randomly sacked this weekend. It's just so wrong. There's this palpable feeling of just, what? That's being expressed by everyone in the community right now. So yeah, if you've been following the sport, you're well aware of Danny's now obviously ill-fated decision to leave Red Bull in 2019 for Renault, which would then mean he missed out on a championship-winning car by 2 years when Red Bull switched to Honda unit from Renault, by the way. It became the car that not only ended the Mercedes dominance, but became the most dominant car over the next few years. He was only 2 years away from that. For then leaving Renault for McLaren, and let's be real, leaving Renault, considering where Alpine is now, maybe not the worst idea the bros ever had, but I also can't help but wonder, considering that they were building around him as a driver, where that would have went. It's not important. Obviously, he went to McLaren, and that didn't work. Despite it feeling so right on paper, a Danny Rick championship in a McLaren car would have fed generations. Unfortunately, he never gelled with that car and got paid out halfway through the season to leave in favour of Oscar Piastri, making this the second time Danny Rick's been kicked out of F1 with little to no warning, within the McLaren immediately going through a lower patch after he left, but then now becoming a potentially championship winning car 2 seasons after he left. I don't like thinking about it, but like if I have to think about it, you have to think about it, and that's why I'm telling you about it, because like, why? Now, I think a lot of us thought that when Ricciardo joined the second team AlphaTauri, now known as RB, also kind of known as VCarb, Visa Cash Out Racing Bulls, that's a great name for a team, that he would come in, beat Yuki up a bit, before going to replace a respectfully underperforming Sergio Perez, who had been the only driver to maintain some form of stability in that seat since Dean left back in 2018. It would have been poetic, it would have felt right. At the time when this dream was starting to forge, Red Bull was the fastest car, Max Verstappen felt unstoppable, which meant Danny probably wouldn't win a championship in that team, but would see him on the podium a few more times, a few more shoeies, a few more race wins maybe, it would have been fun. It would have been fun for all of us. So turns up Yuki's got hands. But not only that, Danny would then go on to crash his car on his first race back. I think it was the first race back. It was really unfortunate. So off the rep, had to take about 4 races off and was replaced by Kiwi Liam Lawson. In the meantime, Liam Lawson ended up impressing everyone before then being replaced by Danny Rick, who had an okay rest of the season, but, not quite what we were expecting. But I'm pretty sure we all looked at Sergio Perez, who wasn't getting any better, and kind of had this thought of, he's not doing great, but they'll switch to drivers. It just makes sense. And this was the status quo for the majority of this season. And then there was a 3-step process in ruining the dream. Number 1, Sergio Perez gets re-signed out of nowhere. This still doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I won't lie to you. No disrespect to Checo. Make your money, get that bag, king. You do what you need to do. But he was getting kicked out in Q3. Danny was out qualifying him. What are we doing here? Next was a string of pre-mid results from Ricciardo, and at the same time, Red Bull saying, actually, Sergio might actually be that bad. He might have actually known what he was talking about when he was complaining about this car, and just Max just happened to be winning all the time in it. But now, as our car's gone worse, we can see what's going on here, and we should probably keep Checo. That's not a direct quote, but that was a sentiment coming out of Red Bull camp. Then one weekend, everyone just starts hearing that, this is probably going to be Ricciardo's last race. He's about to get kicked out, and Liam Lawson's going to come replace him for the rest of the season. And everyone just let our collective, huh? What? It was confusing. It was weird. Why did that Why did it happen like this? From how it looks now, I feel like this was a pretty much confirmed decision at the time, but it didn't really look like Ricciardo knew for sure. The whole weekend, he just looked kind of confused, emotional, not sure how to feel at all. He then went on to have maybe the worst race of his career, where the tyre strategy just completely didn't work, and he had to have 3 pit stops. And he was so far back where he did have enough clear air where he could pit for softs and get a fastest lap, which was quite fun. I'm glad he got that because there was nothing else for us to go on. Next to nothing satisfying about that final race for Ricciardo. And then after the race, he was kind of just walking around the paddock, pretty much crying, just going through the motions of realizing that this probably, maybe, is it the last night of him being a Formula 1 driver. Shout out, by the way, to Kim Illman for both the great photos and great coverage of the event. I was quite emotional seeing his updates, being like, damn, this is really happening. He's really going out like this. And look, I can understand the perspective from lots of OG fans, let's call it, people who are fans before DTS, going through, hey, he's just another driver, he didn't win a championship, why should there be a big hoopla about him leaving? He's not Sebastian Vettel. I can see that, and I completely disagree with it. As I was yapping about before, Drive to Survive is a big deal and is solely responsible for the humongous uptick in popularity that the sport has experienced. Because we all know it's not the competition. Yes, 2021 was good, but did you watch last year? Yes, the title fight in 2021 was amazing. Yes, Ricciardo was not in that. I get that, I respect that. But that is one title fight in all the years of Drive to Survive. And the sport has been getting popular throughout the whole time. And that popularity is coming from an investment in the human element. Where did that investment start? Please see the start of this video, because his name's Daniel Ricciardo. Actually, you know what? I think it's taking it a little bit hotter. I believe that Daniel Ricciardo has done more for the sport, specifically the popularity of the sport, more so than a considerable amount of world champions. How do you like them apples? And for his last race to be shrouded in confusion and also an awful tyre strategy is so unbelievably unfair. And look, F1's an unfair sport. It's cutthroat. It's always gonna be. It always has been. But that doesn't mean we can't point fingers and try and figure out whose fault this is, of course. And right off the bat, this is not Formula 1's fault. None of them are at fault. And I think specifically the people at Liberty Media and F1, they're probably quite upset about how this went down. Just think about the scale of a farewell he would have had in social media if the Formula 1 team had known that Singapore was gonna be his last race. Yes, there was some graphics, we saw some stuff around the event, but for the most part, they just didn't know. Just think about the sheer amount of engagement they could have pulled and like free advertising effectively F1 could have gained. Danny going out this way is a massive missed opportunity for him. No, the only people at fault here and caused this entire thing to go down the way it happened is Red Bull. But also, not that surprised. Can't really blame him. Red Bull's season has gone from great to bad to it's getting worse. It's not getting better. Red Bull has had a messy season. After the insane dominance they experienced last year and the very strong start they had this year, they've now lost first in the Constructors' Championship to McLaren. Lando Norris may overtake Max in the Drivers' Championship. Adrian Newey has left their design team. The rumours around Verstappen leaving Red Bull altogether are getting stronger. The whole power struggle in the senior leadership. The car started to get worse. Oh, and also, yeah, the driver drama that they've got going on. The pressure of Liam Lawson becoming a free agent was something that the team had to take seriously because he proved himself so well when Danny was gone. They were very much backed into a corner where they had to either choose to trust Ricciardo, whose argument was that his best days were in fact not behind him, despite him not overly showing it in that second team, or Liam Lawson, a promising rookie whose best days are very much in front of him. And considering that they are a sports franchise, at the end of the day, I can't blame them for choosing Liam. I'm not just saying that because I'm a New Zealander, but that definitely does help. but they should have been way more transparent. Obviously, hindsight is a wonderful thing to have, but they could have announced this maybe a couple weeks ago. I don't think it makes that big of a difference. Ricciardo would get a proper send-off in Singapore. You know, hopefully the race strategy doesn't play out the same way, but him getting that fastest lap is fun. It's going to be awkward if Lando loses that championship by 1 point, but like, I'm sure we would have still seen a very emotional Ricciardo in the paddock. But I feel like he gets to be way more, sentimental in that moment instead of just like, almost scared about what's going to happen. It was just so unfair for the team to put him through that. Yes, he wasn't getting the results that he probably needed to at the time, but this is the guy that held it down in between those dominant stints. At the end of the day, the Red Bull team is an advertising platform for the Red Bull drink. And while that car wasn't there and Mercedes was having the time of their lives, Danny Ric was putting a Red Bull on the top of the podium, swigging back those shoeies, and making the Red Bull brand look cool, which is the whole point of the organization. And he deserved an emotional last lap radio message, you know? Not like this. Why did it have to be like this? I'm so upset. I'm so upset. Alright, just had a slight interim to charge my camera battery, and in that time I watched Liam Lawson's first interview as an F1 driver with the NZ Herald. Liam did reveal that he knew about this being a decision for maybe the past 2 weeks. Now, I don't think that negatively reflects on Liam in any way, but it just reinstates, why did Daniel Ricciardo have a send-off like that? If we knew what was going on, why did it happen like that? Honestly, it doesn't feel completely real yet, and as I'm starting to slowly process it and understand that he's not going to be in the sport from here on out, It's actually quite upsetting. I'm actually feeling quite bummed up about it. However, I do want to take a moment to talk about Liam Lawson. I'm really upset it's happened this way. I've been excited about Lawson joining the sport since I started watching F1. In fact, even before that, because my brother was into it before I was, and he was always talking about, yeah, he's a Kiwi, Liam Lawson, he's pretty good, hopefully he makes it. Making him one of the few motorsport drivers I cared about before Daniel Ricciardo. And it's just upsetting to see this mistreatment of Ricciardo just overshadow this whole event. And that's not Liam's fault. It's not even really his management's fault for being so hard on the contract, so that's why this has happened. It's come down to contract details. At the end of the day, you've got to fight for your own self-interest, and I totally understand that. This is all just so messed up. However, seeing Lawson in the sport is super exciting. It is ironic that he's managed to remove Ricciardo after showcasing his talent when he replaced him last time. The DTS script writers have popped off on this one, but I do see him as a potential candidate to replace Daniel Ricciardo in the culture. Obviously, the Ricciardo that we were introduced to in DTS wasn't a rookie, he was already a race winner. He had that confidence about him that allowed him to be the honey badger that we knew in that show. But I genuinely think, Kiwi bias aside, that Liam Lawson is one of the most compelling characters that's been shown through Drive to Survive. Which only really matters if you care about the human element of the sport, but I'm guessing if you clicked on a video about Daniel Ricciardo and you're still watching at this stage, you care about the human element, let's be real. Short little clip when Liam does a whole, it should have been me, they should have picked me. That moment of vulnerability and like just emotion, it resonated with me. I know I'm like biased because Aotearoa, you know how it is. But you just don't normally see the drivers give themselves over to Netflix like that, like he did. At least right off the bat. We get to see him through this angle of like, he's a rookie, he's new to the sport. You see that cute moment where he's in the driver briefing before Singapore. His first race was Singapore. And Carlos does a whole like, oh, you're gonna wish it was over by lap 3. And you see Liam like slowly realize like, you know, how bad of a time he's in for. I think that's super compelling. I think if you were a fan of Ricciardo through Drive to Survive, you can find a lot of things to like about Liam. Also, as someone who, you know, does social media as a job, seeing Lawson try and expand his brand into social media, like he's got his YouTube vlogs, he's got his TikToks and all that. I tried to become friends with him. Did not work. Did my best. But seeing him try and create that brand that Ricciardo has working in his favor to try and compete with him in that way, you know, not in a hostile way, like just in a pure like business move way, was really, I always appreciate when athletes think about ways that their brand is perceived and how that helps them and outside of just them being good at what they do. And I think that came from him realizing that, again, he did everything he needed to do. He drove the nuts off that AlphaTauri. He beat Yuki multiple times. He outqualified Max Verstappen off the jump. Like, let's not forget about that. But he still wasn't chosen for that seat. And now, do I think he beats Max Verstappen in a championship contending car, or any car really? Unfortunately, I don't know if I feel that at the moment, but it's been cool to see him in those conversations. I'm about to use my favorite word again. However, he might be in those conversations, but he doesn't even have the RB seat confirmed for 2025. It's a real make or break situation. Basically, I'm saying all this that, like, no pressure, Liam. I know you're watching this. But he really needs to beat Yuki over his next 6 races. I'm going to be very stressed about this. I'm no longer stressing about Ricciardo in the RB seat. I'm now going to be stressing about Lawson. And unfortunately, Yuki was beating Ricciardo. This is going to be cinema, is all I'm saying. It's going to be a lot. How all this is for a competition for a second seat that, at the time when these conversations started, was a second seat in the most dominant car in F1 history. Which sounded really good. Of course you want Ricciardo to be in that seat. Of course you want Liam Lawson to maybe be in that seat. But with the direction that Red Bull's going, I don't know, part of me just isn't sure if it's like gonna be the best move for either Yuki, Lawson, or Ricciardo, who's no longer in contention for it. I don't really know where this goes. Which brings me to my next point. What's next? Is Daniel Ricciardo gonna be in F1 next year? Or just again, is he ever gonna be in F1 again? I hate to say this, but I just don't see it happening. The only seat available right now is the stake seat, which is gonna be Audi in a year's time. And yes, he could go there, but one, that's completely writing off next year because we know that Stake's just not going to be good. I'm sorry, Stake. No hard feelings. And then we hope Audi's good in 2026. A new engine manufacturer, a new constructor on the grid, and a team that's been bad for a while. Like, crazier things have happened. Braun did win a championship at the end of the day, but like, it's a pretty big gamble assuming they want him. They do have the experienced veteran in Nico Hülkenberg. Yes, Danny has the more impressive resume, but Nico's on the contract. And yes, it does feel weird that every teammate that Danny's beaten has stayed in F1 and he won't be. But Ricciardo did make it very clear that he wasn't interested in just sitting in a midfield car and taking up a seat. And even if other seats start opening up, I just think that's the only option he's going to be left with. Clearly, unless some insane stuff happens, we either Max leaves, Checo goes, Liam's bad, I don't know. He's not going to Red Bull. It just doesn't seem like it's going to happen. Ferrari just threw away their stability they had with the C-squared lineup to bring in Lewis Hamilton, which already, like, they've got enough on their plate. Mercedes always has their champion from the young core and George Russell, and the potentially next Max Verstappen-like talent of Kimi Antonelli. Zero space for a Ricciardo. And McLaren has potentially the best driver pairing on the grid right now, or at least the most competitive, and they also just fired him 2 years ago. They didn't just fire him, they paid him $20 million for him to go. The comeback would be crazy. Yes, maybe he goes to Aston Martin, but that all seems messy. He just isn't really anything left for Ricciardo in F1, which is so sad. He's got to be one of, if not the biggest victim of the Mercedes dominance at the end of the day. And now it was kind of a victim of this new generation where we had a really young core of drivers that were all the same age and all pretty good. There just isn't space for a race-winning Ricciardo. I think we can all agree that he's destined for more than. So these are my predictions what's next for Daniel Ricciardo. These two major routes, I think they all both end in the same place, which I'll cover that first. I think in like 10 years, however long, Ricciardo comes in as a pundit on Sky Sport. Think what Jenson Button does.
I don't miss you at all.
You so miss me.
I don't miss you.
You do.
We used to be friends.
Yeah.
And is just the best. Is just the best. Like, he would be the best. Like, love you, Jenson. You're great. Don't tell me you don't see the vision, all right? But in the time before that, there does seem to be a bit of racing talent left in there. We have seen an odd good result from Daniel, and he hasn't had the car to work with at all this year. So him to continue his racing career for maybe, 5 more years doesn't seem completely insane. Where he goes, personally, I want him to go to NASCAR. Yes, he may be more prestigious options, maybe an IndyCar if he wants to stay in America, or maybe a WEC. But NASCAR not only has a Netflix series that he would dominate in, but NASCAR just feels perfect. It just feels kind of perfect. He's already expressed a deep love for the sport and is very close to being American as it is. There hasn't been a driver that's just gelled with the culture as well as he has. And I think his attitude and maybe a bit of his like ambitious driving style, at least the type we saw in his prime, would just, from my understanding of NASCAR, work well in NASCAR. Does he win in NASCAR? I don't know enough to say that. I'm just a boy at the end of the day. However, I just feel like he could do okay at least. If he wins a title, that would be amazing. But it's totally on the cards where he builds a decent legacy in NASCAR. And I think that would fulfill his racing itch. Maybe not as much as an F1 title would have. I don't know, maybe the NASCAR fans are looking at this and going like, no, he wouldn't last, it wouldn't work. And sure, I don't know anything. But as far as the racing goes, I feel like that would be a good place for him to be. Maybe he takes a shot at the Triple Crown. He does have the F1 Monaco win at the end of the day. He could take a stab at winning Le Mans. I don't know who with. I would like to see him in a Ferrari. No idea how realistic that is, but that's my fantasy. However, also the idea of Daniel Ricciardo as an entrepreneur is also interesting. I don't mean this in any disrespectful way, I just don't know how else to articulate it. There was definitely a trend as Daniel's driving results in F1 got worse, his business ventures got better. DR3 wine, which I would love to try, his slew of brand collaborations, and of course his luxury merch line Enchanté, which I will be investing at some point. Just, once YouTube turns my monetization back on, maybe, I don't know. Ricciardo, the entrepreneur, is very much a very real deal. He absolutely has the chops to just be a pure personality brand if he wants it. Maybe some people find that depressing that he becomes only that. I don't know. He already has the social media following, and now I wouldn't be surprised if we see more YouTube content coming from him, or, more IG stuff. The pieces of a social media empire is absolutely there. However, unfortunately, I don't think any of these future paths contain a seat in F1, let alone an F1 world title. In Daniel's words himself, the fairy tale ending didn't happen. It was all a really nice idea. But at the end of the day, it's almost more impressive that Daniel could have this impact, could have this following, could have this sheer love and admiration from the sport without even being a world champion. He was just Daniel Ricciardo. And that, now in the words of Lewis Hamilton, makes him a legend. Thank you for the memories, Danny, and thank you for the butterflies. Sorry, that was real sentimental, but at the end of the day, I am kind of cut up about this. I mean, obviously enough to yap about it on a microphone on the main channel for however long this was. The recording's about an hour, so I'm hoping this video is under 20 minutes. It won't be, but as I believe I mentioned before, I have very much been considering getting into F1 content for a while. Although I've only been watching for a few years, I have grown very passionate about the sport and have lots of opinions, and I want to talk about it more. I want to yap about it more. And I am aware that there's a considerable amount of F1 fans in my following, so I don't know. I feel like this could be a good fit. If you enjoyed this video, if you want to see more F1 content from me, or if you just want to see more F1 content in general, it's happy to be made by me. Same thing, isn't it? I've created a second channel under the disc branding, and that's where all future F1 content will go, unless it's a really big deal like this was. But if that sounds like you, I will be linking the channel at the end of this video, or you can find the channel in the description below. Although it's a bit morbid that I've used this opportunity to make more content, but I also wouldn't even be considering making F1 content if it wasn't for my investment in Daniel Ricciardo. So in a way, it is kind of full circle. In some ways, I don't know. I've gone off script now. I don't really know what to say at this stage. My talking points have run out. So I'll catch you later. Thank you so much for watching this video. Sorry for yapping so much. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, but if you subscribe to Disc as well if you want to see more F1 stuff. Alright, I'll catch you later. Stay hydrated. Take care of yourselves. Bye.